All right, so welcome back. Third session, and do just a quick review of a couple of things, catch us up on what we are doing last time, which will lead into things we talked about at the end of last time, like working with transitions and animations and stuff like that. They're often called builds, and we'll do it, finish out sort of the comic book graphic novel thing, start playing with those animations and those transitions so you can kind of see how they function, and then we'll move into like more traditional presentation styles like the Ignites and the TED Talks and things like that, and kind of how to lay out slides and things of that nature. So I'll just do a quick share and review. We've been working in a single folder, right? Kind of keeping everything organized. So as we build things in just for this class, keep everything in this one folder, but hopefully it also gets you in that notion and in that habit of keeping things organized and keeping things contained so you can easily find them. The comic was the thing we had done a couple of weeks ago where we were, sort of adding the shapes as backgrounds and stuff like that on full pages. The graphic novel is what we spent a little bit more time last week working on, which is a little bit different in the sense that we're taking the Google slideshow and now we're turning it, and we're literally reorienting the page by going to File, Page Setup, choosing Custom, making it 8.5 by 11. The reason why we're doing that is with the sort of the mindset of, well, we're going to print this out and kids will have a hard copy of something. Now, obviously, you can make those dimensions anything you want it to be, 11 by 8.5. If you want to go the other way, you could do legal size, you could do whatever. But just the notion that we don't have to think of the Google Slides as just simply a slide, we can actually make it look like a piece of paper. And for this one, what we did was we just put in like 4 shapes, 3 or 4 shapes, using, and I'll just do, using this title and body as sort of the baseline, using these boxes as your margins, so to speak. So what we did was when we wanted to create our panels, like our sort of comic book panels, sort of dragging it out, using those red lines to line it up. The reason we do this is that depending on, when you go to print, or if you're just what screen you're displaying it on, things may get cut off on the edges, or things may bleed off the edges, or you may be binding these things. So that's why I like to do, when I work with this kind of stuff, I like to keep things inside of these margins, or I use them as margins just to kind of give myself a sense of like, where are my edges and where might things separate and get clipped. I tend to always put a gap in between my panels. It's just me, but you don't have to. You can actually have the panels touch. And when you look at different styles of graphic novels and comic books and things, you'll see various different styles of that. Sometimes things will bleed across 2 panels. And it's all fine. It's all whatever the creative thing is. And then we put in pictures and then use an additional shape for your sort of narration box. And we use the call out, which again is in shapes, to do speech or thought bubbles, speech bubbles. What we did is we double clicked on these pictures, and what we did was, you can see there's that big large photo. What we did is we cropped it or masked it and basically took out and made it fit inside of our panel without stretching or squishing. Double click on it and you take these black bars and you adjust them, and then that's how you make that picture. You're not stretching or squishing it. And it's cropping in the sense that we're only seeing part of it, but it's not a true crop because we're not deleting the stuff. We're masking it out, meaning like we're just sort of hiding the stuff that we don't need. And then that's how you can like have like a real photo. So you kind of have that mix of, like, I always refer to it sort of as the Knuffle Bunny style. If you're familiar with the Knuffle Bunny books, it's like cartoon characters over real photos of real places, and just creating, your story and your different effects, and how you can actually layer images. If you don't have the perfect image, you can layer different images. And then what we did, like with this one, was we took this and we had selected a couple of things and grouped it. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one. And that's just the background. But see, it's all grouped, so I'm moving just that one, but you can see it's still connected. Because remember, what you can do with this stuff is, as you're working with these different objects, you can group but you can also adjust within the group. So what I mean by that is if you have this and this, you can either click and then hold down shift and click to kind of select them, or you can like click and hold and drag to select, arrange, group. This will let you move them as one, move it as one piece. You can resize it as one piece, but what's also nice is even within that, if you then just select a different single object, they'll still maintain the grouping and still a single object, but you can actually adjust inside of a grouping, which is nice. And then that's about it. And we just, talked a lot about the cropping or the masking. And, you may find a picture that's not perfect, but you can use that mask to only pull out what you want. What I think we also talked about, and I'll do it real, oh yeah, we did, here it is this, which is the masking of the image as a shape. And when you click on it, right up here where you have the little crop image, it's really just the mask image, meaning you can mask it into like any shape that you want. So it's essentially a variation of the crop. And that's about it. And that's kind of where we are now. And now we're going to start moving. The last thing sort of with these visuals will be, like I said, the animations and transitions. And then we'll start moving into more traditional presentation styles, but how you can set them up to be more engaging than just a straight bullet pointed thing. Everyone good so far? All right. So one thing I like to do when talking about animations and transitions is I use the original comic book. And I like clouds, because clouds are sort of an easy thing to sort of understand. You're making them behave like sort of a cloud would, which kind of helps then see how these different animations work and how you can manipulate them to do things that they're not necessarily designed to do. So for instance, I'll share again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to that original comic book. And so I have this, right? And I'll even do this again. I'll make a clean one real fast. So I'm just going to come over here and I'll put my blue sky and I'll just go a little bit beyond the border. Here we'll do like a pale blue sky, and then we'll do our little hill. Oops. And we'll make the little hill green. And remember, if you can't quite stretch it out, you change the view to like 50%. That'll let you stretch it out. So that way it actually is doing what you want. And then you can see down here how we've gone across and created this circle. So now I'm going to add a couple of clouds. So there's a cloud. We'll make the cloud white, an actual cloud. So I have 3 clouds. So now, if when we're looking at this, we want to animate something, and this goes for anything, because remember, everything is an object. Text boxes, images, call outs, speech bubbles, shapes, they're all objects in these little blue boxes. So when you do this, you have a number of different things you can do. Oops, wrong one. Insert animation, right? And you can see above, we can talk about some of these other things as well, but they're all essentially the same thing. They exist inside of these boxes. So I'm going to do animation. The animation, when you do it, is automatically going to sort of select that one that you had clicked on first. So see, if I click on this, it already has a fade in animation because I had selected to insert an animation while this thing was selected. So I've got fade in, and you notice it says on click. So what does this look like? So if I click play, this is what it looks like. 2 clouds, hill, and a background. If I click, then the other object animates in. What you can also do is, you can add an animation. Now I've selected this. I'm going to add an animation to this object. Let's say fade in on click. Let's say that's all the same. I can also pick these up and I can move them around to change the order. And I'll add an animation to here. We'll just do that. So now if I click play, Now when the slides comes in, there's nothing there. And there's nothing there because it's hidden, which was one of the examples from last week about like how you don't necessarily want the answer or the text or whatever it is to show up right away. You add those animations so the object is hidden until it does what you've planned it or scheduled it to do. In this case, fade in on click, meaning I click on the slide and it fades in. I can then click on the slide, the next one fades in, and so on. Now, what you could also do is instead of on click, if you wanted to sort of mix and match your triggers, we can keep this first one on click. This second one, we can change it to after previous. And then we'll change this last one to after previous also. Now, none of them are going to come in because that first one is an on click trigger. So if I click, the first cloud comes in, but then you notice the other ones come in automatically. I didn't click those second two times because those were done after previous. So it allows you to decide what things will be hidden until you decide versus which things may actually sort of start a chain reaction of different things appearing at different times. Now, you have to keep in mind that much like the shapes and layering, right? You're not, everything is one on top of the other. It's very linear and it's a stack. Same thing here. You're either doing it on click, after previous, or with previous. So what does with previous look like? So I can change this from after previous to with previous. What that's going to do is once that first one starts, the second one instantly starts as well. So I still don't see any of them because the first one is an on click trigger. I click, first one comes in, and then the second two come in. Because the second one was after previous, the third one was with previous. So you can connect objects to animate together individually based on the click trigger, or in a sequence, one automatically after the other. You have those different options. I'm going to pause there for a second. Does that make sense to everyone so far? Any questions?
Can you just walk us through with where was, I didn't see the with previous.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'll show you other types. Like we just did the fade in, that's the generic one. And I'll show you some of the other options and sort of when you might make these choices. So when you click on an object, right, and you've got your insert and you've done insert animation. So you have this window here on the right, it says motion. So right now this is highlighted in blue because this one is highlighted in blue. If I click on this one's highlighted in blue because this one's highlighted in blue. If I click this little drop down arrow next to it, I get these options in this box. I have fade in, and then this is where after previous is. On click, after previous, with previous. So that's where I could decide what that trigger is going to be. So for that one, I had selected after previous. For the next one down here, I had opened it up and I had just selected with previous to basically bind it together. Now, you can also change from fade in to a bunch of other stuff. Fade out if you want it to disappear, fly in, fly out. Now, with anything, I always advise purpose. Like, why are you doing these things, right? For instance, I'm not a big fan of using the out animations because my feeling is whatever's on the slide, that's what you want your audience to focus on. If you wanted it to leave, well, most likely you're just actually going to the next slide. So you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time doing outs. You're kind of fading in the information or you're animating in the information. The information is going to be fixed. When it's time for that information to leave, you're going to go to the next slide. And then that way you don't need to do out animations. However, the reason why I like the cloud thing is this is a way where you can kind of see how those things work. So for instance, I'm going to say fly in from the left. Now I'll play it. Kind of looks like a cloud moving across the sky, right? So then what I could do is I could say, all right, I want to actually make these look like they're flying in. So we're going to fly in from the left. We're going to do after previous. And I'm going to do fly in from the left. And we're going to do after previous. Now you also notice that down here you have slow, medium, fast, right? So you can change these. I'm going to slow this. We'll do slow on all of them just to over exaggerate our effect. Now we click play. Again, the first one is still triggered on click right there. So I click here. The first one, we slowed it way down, so it's taking forever to come in. And the next one is taking forever to come in also. The third one. Now those are in, so that could be an object, it could be an image, it could be information, right? It could be a bullet point, it could be whatever it is. Now in general, you don't want that stuff to leave because you want your audience to see the information. Except if you're trying to affect a result, something like this, where you want to have motion or add sort of depth or texture to your piece. Then what you can actually do is you can even select this one again, add an animation to it. So now we have a second animation on that one. And I'm going to do fly out to right. And I'm going to make it slow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do after previous. And then I'm going to move this one right up after itself. So what that's going to happen is when I click this, it's going to start to make the clouds look like they're going across, and they're actually like going across the thing. Because it was flying in and out one right after the other. Now this one's going to come in and stop because I didn't give it an out. This one's going to come in and stop because I didn't give it an out. But this is how you can sort of mix and match and play around with those animations.
You're sort of making a banner there, like almost out of that. Like you could write something on that cloud and it could.
Totally.
Right. So how exactly did you do that again? You went really fast.
Yep.
It's like all those steps, like, no, I'm going to move it up here and it's magic.
And I just want to say, like, I don't know if other people have this problem, but originally the screen with everybody's faces was blocking. So the reason I didn't see it the first time, I had to minimize
the heads. Yeah.
Because otherwise I wasn't able to see what you were doing.
Yeah, so like when I'll share again in a second. If you see all of our faces on that little box, there's a line. If you click that little line, it'll minimize all the faces. So you don't see anyone's faces, and then you'll be able to see the full screen. And we'll do it, and then I'm gonna have you guys try it with the same thing I'm doing, which is literally just clouds, because that way you kind of understand what a cloud is supposed to do, right? Like a real cloud. So again, what I did is this, and I'll even go way back to the beginning.
Thanks.
So I'm gonna stop this. So essentially all I did was I had my blank slide, right? I put in my sky, just a square. You know, that's sort of my background. I changed that, you know, to like a pale blue. I wanted to put in my little hill. Right, this is not perfect, but this part you guys all know, right? So there's that. Now, in terms of my clouds, I just went and I grabbed my cloud, which is right here in that sort of second row of the shapes. And I'm just going to make that white. And then all I did was I just copy and pasted. So I have 3 of them. Right, so we have these three objects. We want to add motion to these 3 objects. Now, again, these objects could be a text box, it could be a bullet point, it could be a picture, it could be anything. Because anything that's in a blue, that's what's nice about slides. Everything comes in this like blue object box. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an animation. Now, when I do this, the first thing that's going to be animated is going to be this one because it's selected. So just be aware of that. So if I think that I want to animate this one first, I select it before I go to the insert animation. That way I know exactly which thing I'm animating. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to animate. Now, over here on the right-hand side of your screen, it's this motion window. This is also where you do slide transition. We'll get to that in a minute. That's what happens when one slide moves to the next. We'll do that in a second. But right here, we're doing object animations. So this one is currently, because it was selected, and it's very, very faint, but there's actually a little blue shadow around this cloud showing you that this is the one right here that we're going to work on. So right now it's going to fade in on click, and that's it. So if I click this play button down here, play is sort of like a preview button. What that'll do is that will then show you what it looks like. So I click play, and you see that that object isn't there. The object's not there because it's set to come in on click. So when I click the slide, then my cloud comes in. So that's how I animate one object. I press stop to stop the preview. Now, if I wanted to change that animation from fade in to, let's say, fly in, I would just do fly in, let's say, from the left. If I click play, it's still on click. I click play. It's not going to be there, but then when I click the slide, it's going to fly in. Press stop. Now, I want to, and this little triangle just collapses it. So if you have a lot of things animated, it's just helpful because that way it doesn't get confusing. So now if I click on this other object, when I select it, you see this add animation button like pops up. If it sort of like really highlights it. Like right now it's there, but it's not as sort of, obvious if you're not actually working within an animation. So I'm going to click add animation, and I've selected this. So by doing that, we're going to know that we're adding the animation to this middle object. And then same thing, if I wanted this one to fade in, fine. If I didn't want it on click, I would change it to, like, let's say after previous. Again, if I want to change the speed, so 2.9 seconds, 3 seconds, things like that. This is how long it takes to show up, or it takes to do the animation. So then I click play. Both are going to be gone. And the reason why you're not seeing both is because your first one is on click. So the first one's waiting to arrive. You have to trigger it. The second one knows it's doing something after the first one. So it's not going to be visible either until the first one does whatever it does. Maybe they're all on click and they're never going to show up until you click. Or maybe like this, you have it set so you trigger the first one with a click, and then the second one just follows after automatically. Press stop, and then I'll select the third one. I'll add an animation, and let's say I make this, I don't know, fly in from bottom. And I'll make this one after previous also. So when I click play, now none of them are there because the second two that are automatic are still waiting for the first one to occur, which is on click. And that goes in, and this one, and then the one from the bottom. Now, you could, if you wanted to, you could make this first one be after previous. So what that'll be is, that will be once you move to this slide, it'll happen automatically. So that would be like an automatic trigger for as soon as the slide pops up, the animations would occur, in which case it would look like this. You just hit play and everything sort of starts happening automatically. Cool.
Yeah, how did you made like a banner before, remember? It just kept going. How did you do that?
Oh, so what that is, I did an out. So
Yeah,
when you look at these things, so right now these are in, fly in, fade in, fly in. They're all ins. You can add multiple animations to a single object. So what I did was, this fly in from the left was this one. So all I did was I selected it again. I added another animation to it. Now, right now it's the fourth one. It's at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it from fade in to fly out to right. It's flying in from the left, and I'm going to have it fly out to the right. And I'm going to change it to be after previous. Now, this is still the number 4 animation. I don't want it to be. I want to click and hold on it and drag it up to be the second animation. So that way, this one object, if I click it, you see it has 2 highlighted animations. It's going to fly in from the left as soon as I hit play, or as soon as I show up on the slide, it'll fly in from the left, and then it'll automatically fly out to the right before anything else happens. So if I click play, it just does that because it did those 2 animations, one right after the other. Now, obviously that was super fast. So what I might do is I come over here and I let's go medium. Let's go like 3 seconds. And let's fly out. Let's also do 3 seconds. Oops. So that way, when you do it, it will move in a consistent speed. So that's basically flying in and flying out. And that's how you set that up. Like sometimes you may want objects to leave, but again, sometimes you may not want. Sometimes if you want the objects to leave, it's really because you're moving on to a new slide. So you wouldn't actually animate an out. You would just move on to the next slide.
But you could do an out, like if you had, say, a riddle or something up there and the answer was behind an object and you wanted on click for it to fly out or,
Totally.
you know, problem.
Totally. Yeah, completely. You could definitely add like, so that would be a situation like this. Like you may add a shape, the shape is, what is my name, right?
Mhm.
And then you add another shape, something like this. And then you put this here, but then arrange, order, send backward. So it's going to put it behind the box I just did, or the layer I just did, which is the what is my name. And you send that backwards. So now that's selected. So I'll just add an animation to that.
Would you want that to move or do you want your name to stay and you want,
So
what is
here-
my name?
Right. So here's what's interesting is you have to, if you animate this one to do
Yeah.
something, you got to be careful about how you're animating it. Because if you had this, let's say this was like a fade in or something, then you would see the answer before it showed up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
got to play around and you got to sort of, right?
Oh, that's going to be tricky then. Yeah. How are you going to do that?
Right.
Sure.
Now, in this situation, so watch, we'll do it in this situation. So I'm going to delete this, just trash can. I'm just going to delete that. So in theory, the answer is going to be hidden because I am not going to do an in on this. I'm only going to do an out.
Okay.
That will hide it. Where it gets tricky is if you want the question to animate in, the answer then also has to animate in behind it, so it's still hidden. Otherwise, the answer is going to be there and the question will animate above it. But so for this one, I'm going to add an animation and I'm going to do a fade out. And let's say on click, right? So if I click play, this is set up. So now the reason why the answer is hidden is because I didn't animate an in on the what is my name. So it's just sitting there. So the other box is sitting behind it. Now we're up to the point where I want to fade out on click. This is where I'm ready to reveal the answer. So I click, and then there's that answer. So that's where you have to play around with sort of the structure and the order of your animations and exactly what you want them to do and be purposeful about it. Because if you're not careful, this could happen. If you're not careful and you're like, I want this one, I want this animation to show up. I want it to fade in. And here, I'll put it over here. It's going to fade in with a question, and then it's going to fade out with the answer. Except if I hit play on this, the answer's there. The answer's there because it's not animated. So it's like the background. It's just going to be there.
Yeah.
So if you wanted that question to fade in, you would have to make sure that you set that answer to fade in behind the question, after the question, and then have the question leave. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You see, then that comes in, and then if I click again, then it goes out. So you got to be careful about sort of structuring those layers, right? And structuring how that happens. And again, same way with anything. Like even if it was a text box, a bullet point, a picture, doesn't matter. You have to understand that something that's not has zero animation will be on the slide. It's going to be visible. It's like part of the background. If you want something to not show up, you have a bunch of things animated and you're like, I don't want anything to be on the slide when I first open it up. Well, then everything has to have some form of animation because otherwise it's just going to be sitting there waiting for those other animations to trigger. Cool. So let's do this. Just like I did, feel free with that comic book one we did a couple of weeks ago. You can open that up and do something simply like I did, like with the clouds. Like if you want to play around, you can even duplicate a slide. Like I know you guys had done improvements like your beach scenes or whatever. If you want, you can basically duplicate an existing slide and try to have something like the clouds come in and appear. And if you want, they can like slide all the way across. Or if you have some other very specific thought in mind, like a banner or a riddle box, that's fine too. But just play around with those and experiment with the in and the out and the triggers being on click or after previous or with previous, depending on how you want these things to flow. Cool.
How does that look in present mode? Is it the same?
So yeah, I'll do that real fast. So it's the same as that preview. So if I share this, so if I just click stop, if I go to present mode, it's the same thing. Like right now, it's automatic. I'm not clicking on anything because I did all those after previous. And then this one's going to fade in, then after previous from the bottom. The reason why that Chris is sitting there is because I didn't animate the answer, but I animated the question. So now when I click, now the question shows up. And then I click again, it disappears, seeing the answer. If I wanted it to be like this, I would need to animate the answer to fade in after the question because it's behind it. So I know it's going to be behind it and then have it fade out. And so it looks the same as that, just pressing play on that little preview window. Cool. So it's 3:43, let's say 15 minutes. You can use that comic book thing to start. Just literally, if you want, just do like I did, where you take clouds and just try to get them to like go across or move across your background. If you have a very specific like riddle type thing or a banner or some other very specific idea, do that. Just try to have at least 3 objects that you animate in some form or fashion, playing around with the different triggers and sort of seeing and recognizing like when you would want on click versus when you might want after previous or even with previous if you wanted multiple things to kind of arrive all at the same time. Cool. So let's say 3:45 or sorry, 4 o'clock. Give you 15 minutes, play around with, like I said, use that comic book one just to play around with objects. Cool. And Lisa, did you have a question a minute ago?
I did. And maybe we want to answer this later, but so I have like, if I want to do like waves, like could I make them, I was gonna try to make them like fly in from like come in from the left and go out the right, but I don't know.
Yes, totally.
I feel like I'm having trouble doing 2 different animations on one.
So what'll happen is if you want it sort of like I did where the cloud kept going all the way across, I had that cloud flying from the left. And then I added and then after I had that animation, I clicked it and I added a second animation to that object and I had it fly out to the right and I did after previous and I stuck them. Those 2 animations were touching each other, meaning that object would fly in. And as soon as that fly in animation was done, the next thing was that same object was supposed to fly out automatically. That's what made it look like it was moving across. So same thing with your wave. You would click that wave object, have it fly in from the left, let's say. The very next one would be another animation on that same wave. After previous, fly out to the right, and then the wave would look like it's rolling across the beach.
Got you. Okay.
And then you can do that for all of them. So then, like, let's say you have 3 or 4 wave objects.
Yeah.
Every wave object would have 2 animations, and then it would look like rolling, and they would all be after previous.
Got
So it
you.
would all
Yes.
be like, you know, cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to slow it
Could
down.
we, I wanted to try doing something with the comic. Does it matter where I try the animation?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Nope. I just find that sometimes if people aren't thinking about words or more thinking about making clouds fly across the screen, it's a little bit easier to sort of comprehend and play with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so that was, a few minutes to kind of work on that a little bit. Why don't we just sort of start? We'll do the little loop around. Everyone will sort of show a couple things, and then we can troubleshoot, problem solve. Because this is one of those things. I know I threw a lot at you, but a lot of times you kind of get a sense, and then you got to kind of play and fiddle and stuff. So why don't we go, Amanda first? You're my top left corner box, like Hollywood Squares.
It was just doing a test run. I don't know if it's gonna work. It's a little laggy.
Let's
But-
take a look.
All right. I don't even know what's happening right now. But okay. So yeah. All right. So let me stop and let me play and see if this works. So. Oh wait, I think maybe I need to click the.
Yep, because your first one is a fly in from left on click. There it goes. And then it flies out. Good. So that's that continuous one. Yeah. There you go. No, that's fine. So, but like you got it. You were able to layer those together. Did you have questions about
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite that. It was not quite what I was going for. I wanted more simultaneity. Like I kind of, and I don't know if that's possible, but I kind of wanted the clouds coming in at the same time from different directions and crossing as the sun was rising. But is that even feasible?
No, that gets a little bit complicated. So because it's literally going in this linear sequential order. Now,
Okay.
there's a trick, and I'll wait to the end. We'll take a look at other people's first, and then I'll show you a trick to kind of hack this together. And I want to see if anyone discovered this trick because it references something we talked about at the start of class.
One
Kath-
quick,
yeah,
quick
go ahead.
question. So am I able to make the sun go higher? Or is like it went like halfway up and then it went down? I kind of wanted it to crest higher and then
Mhm.
sink.
Yep, and I'll show you a trick on that because you gotta play again. That becomes like the outside the box thing. You sort of have to play around with like initial placement of the object,
Okay.
and that will then change sort of where it goes or where it stops and stuff. So, but it's all good. Kathleen.
Okay. I don't know what I'm doing here. Hold on. Let's see. Share screen. All right. You. Okay. All right. Let me see here if I can do this right. Desktop too. All right. I don't know if I did it right. They were all supposed to be.
Right. So right now we're just seeing your desktop. We're not seeing the application window, probably because you're running on two screens.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me see if I can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can, to be honest. I'm not really
So
sure.
when you go to share the screen, then one of your options will be application window, and you'll see Chrome, and you'll see that your Google slide presentation. You can just share the application window, and that's a way around it to make sure you're actually sharing the right
All right.
piece.
I think it says you are screen sharing, but I'm not sharing the right screen, you're saying. Okay, so I shared.
Yes. Yeah, you're sharing your number one screen, whereas your Google slideshow is on your number two screen.
Is it now? Now can you see my Google?
Yes, now we can. Yes.
Okay, I don't know why all the fish are up yet. They're not supposed to be here. Let me see.
No, it's fine. So this is good. It's there because you actually haven't. So if you click present or play, then you'll see what it looks like in the beginning. You're in create mode right now, so you're seeing all of your objects. You're not going to be hidden in create mode.
All
But
right,
now when
let's
you go to present, they're not there.
But
That
there's
one fish, because you didn't animate that one fish yet.
Oh, all right.
So now
Well,
if you
let's-
click, you'll start seeing the fish appear.
Okay, good. I tried to make one of them leave. Doesn't look like he's leaving.
All right, so stop present mode and let's take a look at the actual like.
Oh, there he goes.
There he goes.
I guess I must have had it on click.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, so stop the sharing and let's take a look. You have the first one is on click, and then all the rest seem after previous, but you probably had to scroll down that list of the animations, and you probably had that last one on click.
Yes. Fade in
Um,
on click.
Lisa,
Fade
let's
in on click, and then the other one was after that. So this should have been changed to.
after they all should probably be after previous or something like that if you want them to all. And that's also too where like the animation becomes a rabbit hole because you have to then be really thoughtful about like how are these happening. And then if you're
Yeah.
giving this as a presentation, you got to like remember in your head not only what you're supposed to say, but oh, what are the animations? Like, how did I build these? Like, what's so
I
like,
made fish.
right. So, and that's a trick that I'll show you in a minute, going back to Amanda's thing about the clouds, but let's get through everyone's and I'll show you a trick. Lisa, let's see what you got.
All right. So I did a couple, I just like copied the same slide a few times so I could try it out. So this is the original. And then this one, should I just keep it like this or do you want to see or do it in present mode?
Either way is fine. Yeah, present
Okay.
is fine. Or that play is fine too. Cool.
This
there's
is
no-
not trying to do the waves.
Yeah, so your first one is set to on click. So there we go. There's that wave.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
I love that.
Kathy, you're being very nice. Your fish were so cool.
I love that wave.
I like squiggles.
No,
Okay,
that's-
and then my next one,
yeah.
this one looks weird. I was trying to do something with the sun.
So what you have to
so
do is
I
you press
did-
stop and then go to the next slide.
Yes, sorry, there we go. So I tried to do the spinning.
Yep.
But like I didn't keep, I don't know.
Yes. This is
How'd
where
you
it gets a
spin?
little bit, yeah, this is where it gets a little bit tricky because you can't really animate multiple things simultaneously. It's this linear thing, but that goes, I'll show you sort of the workaround to this.
Okay, yeah, because I've kind of wanted, thought it'd be fun if it was like, you know, beating or spinning or whatever. I feel like when I was trying to, the speed was something that I realized I wasn't like paying attention to at first. You know, I feel like that's something I need to be more like work on that a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt. And again, this is like, I didn't give you a ton of time for this. I gave you 15 minutes to kind of play around with it. But the idea being is that you see where the difficulties are, or you see what you want that it doesn't offer. And then I'll show you some tricks that could kind of help that. And then, because in theory, when you're making this, whatever this becomes for like class or a presentation or something, you're going to spend far more than 15 minutes on it. And you'll sort of have a more like cohesive vision in your head. I'm telling you to animate some clouds for process, but like as long as you're kind of getting like where you need to fine tune, that's sort of that's the sweet spot. I mean, that's what we're looking for. Kara, let's see what you got.
So I was working.
Not seeing it yet.
The same thing happened last time too, last week.
Yeah.
Now I can't even click out of. I wonder why.
I don't know. You're on a Mac,
I'm on Chrome.
but you're on a Mac, or you're on a Chromebook or a PC? What's
Oh, sorry,
the
Chromebook.
Chromebook? So the Chromebook does have that intermediary step when you go share screen. You'll choose like desktop, and then there's that other thing, that other little box that pops up that you gotta like select it. Like you gotta like, there's an additional select box you have to do on the Chromebook.
Yeah, it's still not going, right?
No,
Well,
it's all good.
I know even last week I couldn't even do anything beyond that, and I had to completely turn the computer off. Like I couldn't even cancel.
So let's do this. We'll jump to Donna, but while Donna's presenting, why don't you share that file with me, and then I
Okay.
will present your file for you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
So I didn't really play with the times, or I did everything manually. I forgot to do after previous. So I'm going to do a lot of clicking.
That's fine.
I just want to do it present. Okay. I like the way in present it comes in the original, it comes empty.
Well, it comes empty in your preview or present. It's the same. It comes empty when you have things animated. Anything that's not animated will appear on the slide automatically.
Because when I'm in when I'm not in present, well, what am I doing?
You have to, if you're not in present, you're going to
It's
see all your pieces until you hit that
Yeah.
little play button. When you hit that little play button, everything will disappear that's animated, and then it will go through its progression.
Yeah, so here everything is there, and then when you put in
Until,
present,
no, but what I'm saying, jump out of this for a quick second.
yeah. I know if you
If
press
you
play,
press the
but-
play, then everything will disappear.
yeah.
Which
Okay.
you don't need to go to present though, is what I'm saying. If you click that
Yeah.
little play button at the bottom, everything will disappear and until that first animation is triggered. So it's a preview. So you don't always have to go to present mode. You're always
Yeah.
going to see everything while you're creating because you're the creator and you have to see all of your elements. Once you hit that little orange play button, it's the same thing as present, just without
Yeah.
going into present mode.
Okay.
But so everything's on click. So click through. Let's just see what the.
Gotta click every. Whoops! I don't even know I.
There we go. Nice.
Wait.
Nice. Partly cloudy. I like that.
And there goes my lightning bolt.
That's
That's
awesome.
as far as I got.
That's all right. That's awesome. But again, like it's about like you sort of seeing the different things, and I like how you had the two different speech bubbles, you know, and they like sort of changed the dynamic, and it worked too. And your order worked nicely because it was like, oh, it's a nice day, and then the cloud covered the sun, and then that speech bubble went away, and a new one came out, and that's a good example of like where you would leverage the animations, where you want things to come and go if you're trying to basically create like a miniature little like scene in slides. You know, you wouldn't necessarily do it with like bullet points because you don't want the bullet points to disappear. But if you're trying to have like the dialogue box change or the character have sort of like an ongoing conversation, then the animations are a perfect example of where the first speech bubble comes in, says the first sentence, then it goes away, and maybe the other character says something, and that's a good example of how you would play around with those and why you would use certain animations in certain situations.
In the animation, Chris, at one point it said paragraph. Is that what you use with text? Is that, or is that, okay.
Yeah, and what we'll do is once we sort of wrap up with the basics, then we're going to start transitioning into an actual slideshow. I'll show you, or not an actual slideshow, like a more formal presentation. By paragraph, that essentially means carriage return. So like a bullet point is a paragraph. Paragraph is every time you press enter or return, right? So like if you wrote a massive paragraph but never press return and there's 10 sentences in it, all 10 sentences are going to show up at once. If you had 10 distinct bullet points and you animated the box, not the individual bullet point, but the entire text box and did by paragraph, then the first bullet point would come in, and then the second, and then the third, and that's what that is. So it's all based on the carriage return. All right, so I will bring up Sarah's, since Sarah is having some, not Sarah,
I'm
Kara.
Oh, okay.
So I just saw you pop back in, and I got like my RAs, confused. Hold on, this is Kara's. All right, so you did it on the second slide. So let's, oops. Let's take a look. So where's are there animations on this one? Kara, which slide was it that you animated? You're muted, Kara. But she can't unmute. Little struggle bus on the computer. No problem. It's all good. if you want, we'll have Sarah share, and then if you want to reboot, which worked last time, go for it. That's all good. All right, Sarah, go ahead.
All right. And thank you. I just had to take care of something.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. That's all
Nice.
that's all I put together.
No, that's fine. And that's awesome. And with something like that too, if you wanted to, you could even have, because you have those two objects and you have today's assignment is the top one, you could even have today's assignment fade in. So like the first one sort of drops down
Mhm.
and then the other one kind of fades in almost as if it's like turning the page.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Do you know what I'm saying? So, and that's how you can kind of play around with those effects. There's not necessarily a true turning the page effect, but
Yeah.
if you just have it, like the first one can kind of fly in like, oh, I'm going to throw the book on the easel. Cool. And then
Yeah.
the other one just fades in where it's like, oh, the page is turning.
Got it. Okay.
You know, and that's
Good
how you
idea.
can kind of like, you can pass around with that. So I will, while we're waiting for Kara to come back, I will show you guys one of the tricks and then I'll review for that for her. But since you can't necessarily animate multiple things all at once, you can fake it by grouping things together and having things sort of in a batch. You gotta be careful about that though, because whatever you group is going to do these things together. So meaning, and I'll share and I'll give you an example. 1 second. So if I do this, so let's say I have my 3 clouds, right? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate this real fast just so we can change it up. And I'm gonna trash all of these animations. So like right now, nothing's animated, right? Like if I wanted this stuff to be more like together, I could literally click, then hold down shift, and I click all 3 of those objects. And I can arrange, group them. Now it's one. So now when I add the animation, and let's say I do the fly in from left, and this is where like Dada, if I just click this little play button, you'll see that it disappears. You don't see them. Like once it goes to black, like in this little animation. Now when I click, all 3 are going to go together. So how might you use that to affect sort of what you guys are trying to do with your clouds and your waves and stuff? Might be that what you do is, I'm going to ungroup this for a second, is you might, let's say we offset these, right? So they don't look like they're all the same. And then I could group those together. And then I'll add that animation and we'll do a fly in from the left. And then if I wanted to also add the animation for fly out to right after previous. So now 3 clouds, once I click, are going to go all the way across. And obviously I should slow that down because that's a little bit too quick. Now, in terms of other stuff also happening at the same time, you could, if you wanted to, and you have to be careful about this because you start getting into too many groups, it starts going a little bit crazy. So let's say I had another one of these, but it wasn't a cloud. It's a tumbleweed, right? I don't know, that's a tumbleweed color, right? So what I could do is I could group, I could click on this one, and then click on that one, and I can group these all together. And then add the animation, fly in from left, slow it down, I'll add another animation, and I'll fly out to right, I'll slow it down. Now, they're all going to function together once I click. So the clouds come across and the tumbleweed comes across. Oh, and I forgot to do the fly out after previous. You're faking it. And I know ideally somebody would say, well, I want the tumbleweed to spin while it's going in and across. Like, unfortunately, that you can't do. You can't have it. I mean, in theory, you could, but then you get into this crazy layering where you'd have the same object 3 times and each right on top of each other, and each one would be like doing something different. Gets kind of funky. But if you do something like this, where you just decide which things you want sort of together, you can have multiple objects doing stuff at the same time. Now, to the point about coming in or not going to the point that you wanted to, like the sun kind of came in and left. Similar to this is if you watch this, it comes in, but then it starts fading out before the clouds go away. What you do in those situations is you play around with 2 things. One is you might start these not here, but you might start this object over here. So then when you play it, you'll see that the animation is starting off screen, but then obviously it's fading out way too early. No problem. Let's stop it. You can then change the speed. So it comes in a lot faster. What if we did them both super fast? Why did that not work? Click. Why is it not resetting? It's weird. Play. Oh, I don't know why it's not running through the animation. That's weird. Let's slow it down. Let's see if this works. There it goes. Now it's working. And I know it's working because of this little orange thing. So it's going. Now, again, obviously that's not great because it flew in too slow. So this would be where I would play around with my timings on it. And I might have it fly in faster, but fly out slower. See? So it comes in and I'm losing it at different spots. So then obviously you would come in here and you would sort of adjust where you want this to kind of appear from. And then that's how you could play around with where it will show up on your sort of animation cycle and how fast it will do the fade in or fade out. So like with the sun is you might decide, whoops, insert sun. All right, so let's say the sun's there and I want to add an animation and I want it to fly in from the bottom. And we'll do it on click. And what I'll do is let me actually just trash these so I don't confuse myself. So I'll add the animation to the sun. I'm gonna fly in from the bottom. I'm gonna click play. So now when I click it, see, he goes to the middle. And that's because I had placed him at the middle. And if that's where you want him to go, that's where you would have him go. If I wanted him to be over here and I play, he's going to fly into up there. Then if I wanted him to then fly out and I added that second animation, let's say fly out to the bottom. We'll do that on click 2. He's going to fly up because that's where he was placed. So his animation goes, or its animation goes from the bottom left, right to the location that you set it. And then when you click it, it then goes out to that same, back out from that original location. So when you're doing these, you think about how do you want it to appear? Like where do you want it to appear and disappear on the slide? Where do you want it to end? And where you have these things stop is where their location is on the slide. So if you wanted it to be here, this is where the animation is going to end, in that location. So if you wanted it to, fly in, ending up here, but looking different or fading in a different way, you could position this in a slightly different spot. Now, unfortunately, you can't have it spin and animate at the same time. So that's kind of a pain in the butt. So you're limited, but you can group things together to kind of create that sense that it's more than one object at a time, doing stuff like offsetting the objects so they don't look like they're all just like a line of things, but you kind of offset them and like create larger waves or larger crowds, clouds, something like that. You could also, if you wanted to get super funky and super crazy, is you could like copy this and paste it and kind of offset it like a wee bit like that. And you have this one fly in from the left. And then the second one, let's just say we have it spin just for giggles. So now these are purposely both on click. So if I click, see there's different ones. Now the problem with that is, since that second one, I had it spin, you saw it before it started. That's where I might take this one, add an animation, and I'm going to have fade in on click, but I'm going to move this guy up here above the spin. So what that's going to do is it's going to hide it initially, and it's going to have him come here, and then the second one will fade in and then spin. So you have to play around. It gets a little bit intense and crazy if you start doing this. The best ones that I like are, you want something to fade in and just appear. Fade in is simple. It's easy. You want to do that type of thing with the riddle box. You just have the one box sort of fade in behind the other. Click to reveal the answer and it goes away, because you can go down this crazy rabbit hole of trying to have all these different objects all animating in different ways. Kara, do you want to give it a shot?
Is that my computer? No.
What's up?
Oh, I couldn't hear for a moment, so I didn't know if that was my computer.
Oh, could be me in my middle of nowhere internet connection.
Like a jinx on this. I'm going to try sharing again. Can I try?
Yeah, totally.
And desktop, right?
Yeah, try desktop, and then the other box comes up and you sort of select the desktop again and then say share. There you go.
All right.
It's going.
Hiding. Okay, so it was slide one. I was trying to say slide one. So then I present, right? And
Yep.
then it's
Nice. And that's cool because I like how it goes behind it, right? Because it's like you had added those objects later, so the sun was layered in front, and then that's cool because then that one goes in front of it. And that's a cool effect because you're basically giving like depth to this by having one cloud go behind the sun and one cloud go on top of the sun. That's not the animation, that's just where you layered the objects. But that's cool because it then creates that depth of, the sort of field of view, kind of, so to speak. Nice. Awesome.
oh gosh.
It's okay. So is everyone at least good with a baseline sense of sort of the animations? Okay, cool. What we'll do is, for the last half hour, we're going to switch gears and sort of start talking about how we've done all these crazy, wacky things with clouds and waves and stars and stuff. And now let's switch gears back to sort of a more traditional presentation where you still will use these types of things to introduce information, to transition from one bit of information to the next, or you may use none of it because the presentation that you make is sort of standalone visually. Because one thing I like is 6 words, 1 image. which is always, and my favorite thing is I have a slide that talks about the rules of making a slideshow. Minimal bullets, 6 words, 1 image, and it's actually a slide that's nothing but like a dozen bullet points. It's like my irony slide, because it's like the only slide that I have. So people are like, but wait, Mr. Cassat, like the kids even say it. I'm like, no, I know. This is my seeing if you're paying attention slide. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna share again, but I'm gonna go back. I'm in my folder. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a new Google slide. And what we'll do with this one is this one will be STI 5591. We're gonna do an ignite. Now, what is an ignite? So for this, we'll just put a title on here. All right, so that's my first slide. All I'm doing is typing in those boxes. I'm making just a standard slideshow. However, here's where it's going to get different. Now, when I do this, like I said, I generally like this because I generally use, if I'm putting text in, it's easy, add title, add text. Or if I'm doing an image, what I like to do sometimes is actually have the image kind of meet those borders. Because one thing I like is, like, if I take an image and I search the web for, let's say tree, oftentimes you'll see this in presentations. Somebody will put a picture in and it sort of slaps it in. Right now, this picture happens to fill the slide mostly. However, I don't always like this from a visual standpoint, and especially with kids, because sometimes the kids, when they see this, they see those white bars on the side, but not on the top or bottom, and it makes them think that like something's getting cut off. Because sometimes back in the day, it's better now that we're mostly on the same format smartboards. But previously, some of the smartboards were more that rectangular, right? Old school television aspect ratio. Some were the other ones. So sometimes things literally would get cut off on a slide. Like when you on my computer, I can see it. So a lot of times what I do is I'll recommend for kids to do something like this, where what I'm doing is I'm basically lining up the top of the picture with the top of that title box, the bottom of the picture with the bottom of the text box. So it's sort of like a fixed size. And then I'm going to move it and I'm going to center it. And then I'm going to drop it down a little bit, put in the dead center. Now I like this because then it's like the picture's a little bit smaller, but I feel like often when you look at something like this, you feel you know and you understand, you have a better sense visually that you're seeing the whole picture. Because if you can't cover the whole slide, your audience sometimes will be like, why is there a white bar over here but not over there? Why is that not completely frameless? Have it sort of like this, and it draws the attention strictly to that image. Now, why does that image matter? Well, because what we're going to do is you guys are going to do an Ignite talk. What an Ignite talk is a presentation that's 5 minutes long. It's 20 slides. You get 15 seconds per slide and they advance automatically. Ignite talks are designed very literally to enlighten us, but make it quick. That's their tagline. What's cool about them is it makes you focus on the visual and what you're saying. Because there's not a lot of time to read bullet points. There's not a lot of time to read words on a slide. So you have to think about this presentation in a much different way. Because you're like, what am I going to say? And how is that picture going to reinforce what I'm saying to my audience? Now, we do this with students, 4th and 5th grade. 4th grade does 1 and 45-second ignites. So they're like 7 slides, 15 seconds a slide. But again, thinking about that notion that when I give a presentation, I know my content, but I want people to listen to me and see something that reinforces that. I don't want to read off a slide, because you don't want them to read off a slide. So this is not like a presentation that a student is going to use offline or asynchronously. This is doing a presentation from the mindset very literally that you are presenting to people, and you don't want to A, read a slide to them, or B, have them try to read a slide while you're telling them something different. Everyone with me so far? I know it's a bit of a weird concept. It always takes the kids a little while to get used to. I'm not going to make you do an actual 5-minute Ignite. What we're going to do is you're going to do an Ignite on your summer vacation. But you're 4th graders right now. So you are going to do a 7-slide presentation with the restrictions of 1 image or 6 words on the slide. And that's it. Knowing that as you present this to the class, the slides are going to auto advance every 15 seconds. And we want to be listening to you, focusing on what you have to say, with the visual supporting what you're saying. Everyone with me?
So either 1 image or a
Or
maximum of 6 words
Mhm.
on the slide. Okay, so it could
Yep.
be less.
Yes. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Like, yes, totally. But like, try to give that limit, because the idea is that you don't necessarily want your audience to be like reading, because if they're reading, they're not listening to you. You know, and if you're reading to them, they're sitting in the audience like, why is this a read aloud? Like, why don't? Because the premise being is like, if you're in front of an audience and you're reading off the slide, why do they need you? They could just have the slide and read the slide. Or alternately, if you're just going to read off the slide, why bother with the slides? Just read the script to them. Thing about an Ignite talk is, because it auto advances and because it keeps the pace moving, the idea is that it becomes more succinct and more impactful, because the audience is listening to you and connecting very visually to something simple that really reinforces what's being said. And it's a struggle, because generally people want to add a ton of stuff to a slide. A lot harder when you got to decide what's the 1 image I'm going to say. And obviously, like we would do, and I'll show you next time more about the back end in terms of how you might like create a script for this narrative. For the purpose of this little exercise, 7 slides, title slide, and then your last one's going to be a conclusion. So you're essentially going to have 5 slides in the middle that are like real content. Knowing that your introduction slide, you still have to talk for 15 seconds about it. So you would still have something up there that will set the tone for your talk. And then that 7th slide is sort of a summary or a wrap-up slide, knowing that you're not necessarily providing new information in those 15 seconds. You're kind of closing it. And you have basically 5 slides in the middle. That's like the meat of your story. And you can jot notes in the speaker notes to help you sort of visualize how you would tell this story. But so in your folder that you created for this class, make a new Google Slideshow presentation. And you're going to call it STI 5591 Ignite. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to do this. And you're going to start at least by making the 7 slides.
If I wanted to play around and do it on me versus a summer vacation,
Sure.
can I do that?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. Lisa?
Chris, I'm having an issue. I'm having the sad file again.
So, so in the top right-hand corner, does it say update?
No, it
Info?
did last week. It said update and I did that. And
Try quitting Chrome. Are you on a Mac?
yeah, I'm on my school computer.
Command Q. And so you quit Chrome and then try relaunching Chrome. Sometimes
Okay.
that sort of kicks it in the tail, so to speak. And I'll give you guys like 5 minutes to at least start building the framework. And then I'm going to play a snippet of a video from one of the founders of Ignite Talks to kind of give you a little bit more context.
Okay, that worked. Thank you.
You
Mhm.
said 7 slides total,
Mhm.
including the title and conclusion slide.
Yep.
Okay.
And just knowing that like your title slide, you still have to talk to it for 15 seconds, but you're
Right.
sort of introing this thing. And then that seventh slide, knowing that that's the end of your presentation, so you're not necessarily going to be starting new information. You're going to kind of be summarizing what just transpired in this really rapid fire talk.
Got it. Thanks.
Maybe like 2 more minutes just to at least get a couple things down, and then we'll give you a little bit more context for this. All right, so I realize that was like a little bit of a quick intro to this, so let's back up, and I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna play, and I'll put the link in the chat if you guys want to watch this later. But this is a video of Scott Berkin, who is one of the founders of Ignite, sort of talking about how to do it. I think what's great about his talk is A, he's really good at it, but also B, I use this talk with students to sort of illustrate how you find images that represent what you're saying without actually being the quote unquote perfect image. So let me do this. I'm going to skip ahead.
Building multi-person pogo sticks to hacking chocolate. Any topic. Dear. Each speaker gets only 5 minutes and 20 slides that auto-advance every 15 seconds. The talk you're about to hear was recorded live at one of the featured Ignite events around the world.
See, that's that tagline real quick. Enlighten us, but make it quick. The whole point is to be succinct and direct about whatever the topic is.
I think storytelling is everything. It is everything. It's the most important thing that we do. It's the most important thing that we are. And if you go about thinking about life from the perspective of storytelling is everything, then doing things like public speaking or writing or talking or starting a relationship all become a lot simpler. Storytelling happens to be a universal thing. It's a timeless thing. It's something we have done as long as we have been a species. As long as we have been cultures and tribes and governments, we have been storytellers. And in fact, we align ourselves, the people we bond with, we have shared stories that all.
So now I always pause it here with the kids and we talk about this because I think this is a really great example of the difference between sort of what you're seeing when you watch a video versus like the power of just the in-person talk. Those kind of motions on the images, those are not actually happening on the stage. That's just sort of an effect for the video. He's standing in front of just a single image on the screen. Now, this image, he's talking about the people we connect with, align with, bond with. And the way he's illustrating that is with these paper cutouts where they're literally in a line connected to each other. So he's really getting that point across and he's reinforcing that point about the connection of people, not within a photo of actual people, but of a very literal, linear, bonded connection. And that's where, like, when you do a live presentation, sometimes you have to step away from the notion of text and think about the text you're speaking. How can you really reinforce that with a single visual? That's what he does. The other thing that I always talk with kids about is when we watch this, you know, the numbers at the bottom is his 15 seconds and when it's turning. He doesn't stop at the 15 seconds. You know, the presentation you give, regardless of what the topic is a cohesive presentation. It's not a different story on every slide. So if you're a couple of seconds here or there different, or the picture switches before you're ready, like it doesn't matter because you're telling this cohesive story. And then the other thing is down the line. So this is like an example of sort of that 6-word thing. His slide says everyone has a story. The point of the 6 words or less is that if you're going to put text up, make it super impactful and make it powerful so that everyone really sees it and it's very clear what the point is. And that's sort of that notion of keeping it simple, keeping it clean, letting people focus on what you have to say, not so much reading off a slide. Last thing I'll say is, and he does a great job of this, is back here, this is his title slide. And he was talking about it. And what's great about this, and I tell kids, or anytime I do this, like, this is super simple because it's like the one slide where you have a lot of text, right? Because it's the title of your presentation, it's your name, it's all this other stuff. But what he does is he puts 4 little mini images. Well, guess what? Those 4 images appear later in his actual talk. Like, there's the people, you know, talking about things that you love. Then what he also does is at the end, on his conclusion, on his wrap-up slide, he actually brings those pictures back with the sort of reinforcing point. So this goes to that kind of summary where that first slide introduces the topic and like why, grabbing people's attention. Those middle slides are the real core of what you have to say. And then that final slide is a summary and about the different ways where you can use the same images repeated, but to reinforce that point. And of course, kids always say, well, but he's got more than 6 words on this slide. I'm like, right. First and last slide, there's a little bit of leeway because you're introducing and summarizing. The 6-word rule, one image, is really about that core meat of your talk, about the information you want to convey, because you really want people focusing on that. Your first slide, it's an intro. Your last slide is a conclusion. So people kind of already have their heads around the topic. and they're not trying to sort of discern what you're looking at. So that is Scott Birkin, and like I said, I'll put this in the chat. It's a cool video to watch, and I do watch it with the kids all the time, because it's good to get them thinking about how you have to tell this very visual story, where it's the visuals aren't the perfect pictures, but they're the ones that reinforce the point of what you have to say to better drive home your topic. So now, after having seen that, does that make what I'm having you do make a little bit more sense? And I know I only watched a couple seconds of it with you. Everyone good? So we've got 9 minutes. So what we'll do is feel free to watch that video now if you want, if you're sort of still struggling with how to get your head around this content or this concept. Feel free to watch the video. Feel free to keep working on the Ignite. We'll hang on to this for a couple more minutes, and then in about 5 minutes, we'll do some wrap-up stuff in preparation for next week. Cool. And like I said, yours, for the purposes of this exercise, does not have to be a 20-slide presentation. It's going to be a 7-slide one. So your Ignite talk would not be 5 minutes; it'd be 1 minute and 45 seconds, which is what we do with 4th graders. Cool.
And for the images, you think it's more powerful to have, like, let's say I was talking about, my story. So going to Scarsdale High School, instead of having a picture of Scarsdale High School's logo, an image that would be more powerful would be like something I learned, or something that I learned from that experience, or I took away from that, and have a picture of that. Like, all of his images weren't just like basic images. They were like adding to his story in some way.
Yes. And that's the people doing the shadow, the heart. He was talking about how when you have to give a talk, think about things that you love, think about like things that you may want to share. So that's why he had that picture, because it sort of reinforced the heart is love, but it's also people sharing this heart. So it's like it shouldn't necessarily just be very basic, sort of simple pictures, but things that really go to the heart of what you're saying. So if you're talking about Scarsdale High School and how it was where you found your voice as an artist.
Right.
You may have a picture up there of like a person screaming into the abyss, because you're talking about how high school is a great experience because it allowed you to scream out your passion.
Right. Not just a logo of, Scarsdale's insignia. Like,
right. Because then people are looking at it going, okay, for 15 seconds, they're like, Scarsdale insignia, Scarsdale insignia. They're not necessarily.
Right. They're like, I get it. She went to Scarsdale, and then stop listening.
Right. Whereas if you're talking about, I really, got a love for Banksy or whatever, and there's like a huge classic like Banksy piece of art up there, you're like, oh, all right, high school, I get it. But that's where, okay, so she's talking about high school, but this is where she found her vision or her style. Yeah, and that's the trick about this, is like making the presentations not just sort of standard boilerplate logo, but thinking about how can I find generic images, just like clip art type images, but how can I find images that will better reinforce for my audience what it is I'm trying to say.
So when you have students do this, are they how are they able to pick up on that, like in terms of the images?
Yeah, and obviously we start out sort of hardcore about like it's got to be not boring, and they're 4th graders, so then we back off a little bit, but it's like we did one about American Revolution, or like Boston Tea Party, and they did a virtual field trip to the Tea Party Ships Museum in Boston this past spring. So we're like, look, there's 1 million photos of that museum. So if you want to talk about your virtual field trip, awesome. Don't just say virtual field trip, or don't just say I took a field trip. You can get a picture of the museum, or a picture of a boat, or a picture of something, a picture of Boston, but something that will bring that, make that stronger connection. They're 4th graders, so they're not going to be quite as sort of metaphorical and abstract as like Scott Birkin is in that presentation. But what we do is we start as a baseline, because we don't want them thinking, I'm just going to get a picture of the Boston Tea Party, I'm going to get a picture of a boat, so we say, listen, like if you're going to talk about the Boston Tea Party, what picture? So some of them found paintings of it, and they actually reference like the Boston Tea Party. This was such a seminal moment in life that artists painted oil paintings based on the scene. And this isn't necessarily like a photograph of the scene, but it's like the artist's interpretation of what they had heard through the grapevine before social media. You know, so they started to understand that like the image can convey additional things, or alternately, you have to explain the image a little bit, but that can reinforce the story as well. It's also, I like it for the kids because it gets them thinking less about just writing stuff on the screen. It makes them really focus on what matters in the story to make it a really succinct, detailed, you know, well-structured story, right? With an opening, a middle, and a closing.
I mean, I think it's really powerful just for me too. Like one of the things I struggle with the most is how to not load up my PowerPoints with a lot of text. And, you know, if they need to learn it, or if they need to hang on to it, it should be, you know, a worksheet or another document. It doesn't need to be information overload all the time. So this is a good experiment for me as well.
Yeah, and like we've done it in a practical standpoint, we've done it as specials teachers, you know, art, music, PE, for open house, where we said, well, there's like 8 of us. How are we going to do this in a timely manner? A couple of years, we were like, let's do an Ignite. But we simplified it. So it was like, we all get like 1 minute and 45 seconds. We had one presentation that just ran nonstop. And after each person's presentation, it just said like up next. So all of us teachers, we had to come up with what were the most important facts we wanted parents to know in 1 minute and 45 seconds, and how are we going to display visuals to kind of reinforce those points.
I mean, this is what I should use for open house.
Yeah, and it's fun because then it's like you do it and it's done, and people don't feel like it was really short because the content is so like precise, and the visuals really reinforce it, and it flows. So you're never like, oh, the next slide. Oh wait, what's this say? Like, if you're like, oh God, I'm here forever. Like you start, you're like, boom, here's what we do. Here's how we do it. Here's why we do it. Here's a couple of examples. Awesome. Thank you. Good night. You're like, oh my God, that was awesome. I learned so much. And it's like, right, because there were no words on the slides. Like there were, you know, like it's conveyed differently, which makes it more substantial. And it's really hard to do less. Like to have to edit oneself to be like, wait, I can't put a collage up there. Wait, I can't put. And that's really the point of the exercise with the students, is to get them thinking about, don't slap 1 million photos on. Like what's the best way you can visually support what you're saying in that moment. All right. And so what we'll do now is it's just about 5. So we'll wrap up. And what we'll do is, like we've done in the past, is next week, you know, you're welcome to work on this over the week. Don't have to. There'll be time to work on these things again next session. If you want, I mean, it's only 6 minutes or whatever with the whole intro and closing, but like I recommend watching the Scott Birkin Ignite because it's good. And he does a good job of getting the point across as to like why you do it and how you do it and how you practice and things like that. Obviously, knowing that, just like I do with students, we're adapting it and adjusting it just, you know, for our own purposes. The key though being that it would for you guys, it would auto advance every 15 seconds. Like that's like a non-negotiable, because that keeps the pacing going of this presentation without being just reading bullet points. So we'll review this and spend some time at this again next week, and then kind of go a little bit more in depth about like how you might script this or how you might sort of lay the foundation for this with students. And then we'll eventually we're kind of working our way backwards to doing a more traditional presentation with bullet points, but I sort of do that at the end. So hopefully by that point, it'll be much easier to like edit yourself to super simple bullets and edit yourself to super simple animations and, you know, things like that. Hopefully by the time you get back to the point where you're like, oh, I need to actually use a bullet point, you're much more thoughtful about what actually goes into it and how to structure it, because it is good bullet points in a presentation are like its own sort of genre of writing, where you have to be like super thoughtful about like how that little sentence, it's not even a sentence, but how that like statement is structured. Cool. Everyone good? All right. I will see you guys next week. Cheers.
Thank you.